Welcome to Life Stories. Today, we bring you a heart-wrenching tale of a father's love, determination, and the fight for justice. What starts as a simple concern about his daughter's missing lunch quickly turns into a shocking revelation. In his search for answers, a father uncovers a truth that no parent should ever have to face. This is a story of courage, standing up for what's right, and the importance of listening to the voices of our children. Join us as we share this emotional journey. Be sure to subscribe to our channel to start the story today. It all started quietly, almost unnoticed. As a parent, you get used to the little routines, the daily packing of lunches, the slight nudge to eat their fruits, and the soft murmurs of, "Be careful," as you send them off into the world. But something wasn't right. At first, it seemed like a small thing, nothing to be concerned about. My daughter, Emma, was only 3 years old. Kids are hungry, right? I figured she was just growing fast, burning through energy with all the jumping, running, and playing she did at preschool. But then it happened again. And again. Every afternoon, when Emma would return home, her little sneakers kicking the front door open, she'd walk inside, a smile lighting up her face, bright, like the sun, and then she'd drop her lunchbox onto the counter. But when I opened it, there was nothing. No crumbs, no leftover sandwich bits, not even a half-drunk juice box. Just an empty container. It wasn't like her. I always packed enough food. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, slices of apples, crackers, a juice box. Even on her hungriest days, there was usually something left. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was just eating more than usual. Maybe they let the kids share food or something like that. It seemed harmless at first, nothing to worry about. But there was something in my gut telling me that wasn't the case. It wasn't just the lunchbox. It was Emma herself. She had started to change. And not in a good way. When I'd ask her about her day, she'd give me a half-hearted response. Like she wasn't really there with me. Her energy seemed to fade faster than it should. Her usual chatty, bubbly self had become quieter, more withdrawn. By the time the evening rolled around, she was exhausted, drifting off to sleep earlier than usual. I kept telling myself it was just the routine. She was adjusting to preschool, learning how to nap and be away from home for the first time. But my instincts were nagging at me, making me question if it was really that simple. One evening, I was helping her change into her pajamas when I casually asked, "Did you like your lunch today, baby?" I was trying to keep it light, trying to keep the conversation going as usual. She was fiddling with the hem of her shirt, not looking at me. Her little eyes were focused on the cartoon characters on her socks. And I thought maybe she hadn't heard me at first. So, I asked again, "Did you like your lunch, honey?" Finally, she looked up at me, her small face downcast. She shrugged, and then quietly, almost as if she didn't want to admit something, she mumbled, "I didn't eat it." My heart skipped a beat. "You didn't eat it?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm. I could feel my brow furrowing, my concern growing. She shook her head and looked away, not meeting my eyes. "Mr. Thompson eats it." I stared at her, confused. What? The words didn't make sense. My mind tried to process what she was saying, but I couldn't quite make it fit. "Mr. Thompson?" I repeated. She nodded slowly, still not looking at me. "He takes it." My stomach twisted into knots. I don't know why, but I felt a cold weight settle over me. At first, I wanted to dismiss it. Maybe there had been some misunderstanding. Maybe Mr. Thompson, the preschool teacher, had taken the snack as a joke. Or maybe Emma had given it to him on her own, without thinking. Kids do strange things sometimes. But something in my gut told me this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was something far more troubling. For the next few days, I asked Emma again and again, carefully. Each time, she confirmed the same thing. "Mr. Thompson takes my lunch." Her voice was so small, so innocent, as if she didn't fully understand the gravity of what she was saying. But it was enough to raise a red flag in my mind. I couldn't ignore it. I couldn't just let it go. But how could I prove it? I needed more than just Emma's word. If I marched up to the school and demanded answers without evidence, they'd likely brush me off. It would be my word against a well-respected teacher's. I knew how these things worked. I needed proof. I needed to know what was really going on. So that night, I barely slept. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying Emma's words over and over. Mr. Thompson eats it. The thought made my stomach turn. Why would a grown man, especially a teacher, take food from a child? What could possibly justify that? The next morning, as Emma sat at the breakfast table, munching away on her toast, I watched her carefully. She was still her usual sweet self, humming a little tune as she ate. But something felt off. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something deeper at play. Mia, I said gently, trying to coax more out of her. Can you tell me more about Mr. Thompson and your lunch? She chewed slowly, thinking about it for a moment before answering. He says I don't need it all. She looked down at her food, her small fingers fiddling with the crust of her toast. I'm little, so I don't eat much. My grip on my coffee mug tightened, and a strange chill crept up my spine. Did you tell him you were hungry? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even though my heart was pounding in my chest. She nodded, her little eyes meeting mine for the first time. I did, but he said big people need it more. I could feel the anger rising in me, but I forced myself to stay calm. Has he ever done anything else? Said anything mean? Touched you? I braced myself, terrified of what I might hear. But Emma shook her head vigorously, her curls bouncing as she replied. No, he just takes my food. It wasn't much, but it was enough. At least she wasn't being physically hurt. But this was still wrong. Something had to be done. I couldn't ignore what I'd learned. Emma wasn't just telling me about a small incident, she was telling me about something much bigger. Something that felt wrong at its core. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but every instinct in my body told me that I had to act. I couldn't just let this go. But what could I do? It wasn't like I could march into the preschool and accuse a teacher without proof. It would be my word against his. And I had no way of proving what Emma had said. The answer came to me one night as I was staring at the ceiling. The weight of everything pressing on me. I would need proof. I would need something solid to back up Emma's words. A sneaky idea formed in my mind, one that would make me feel better about confronting the school with my suspicions. The next morning, as I packed Emma's lunch, I carefully decided to include something special. It wasn't like I hadn't packed her lunches before. She was used to the usual peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, apple slices, and crackers. But this time, I added something extra, a small voice recorder. It wasn't anything fancy, just a simple device that I had bought years ago for work meetings. It wasn't too big, small enough to fit into the seam of her lunchbox without being noticed. It wasn't even one of those high-end recorders you might expect to see in spy movies. It was just a cheap little gadget. But it was exactly what I needed. I checked it one more time before I packed it away, making sure it would pick up sound clearly enough to capture whatever would unfold. I didn't know what I'd hear, but I knew this was my only chance to find out the truth. If I didn't have solid evidence, it could all slip away. And I couldn't let that happen. As I slipped the recorder into her lunchbox, carefully tucking it under the lining, I felt a knot in my stomach. What if I was wrong? What if this was all in my head? But no matter how many times I questioned myself, I kept coming back to the same gut feeling, that something wasn't right. I watched Emma as she played with her doll at the kitchen table, blissfully unaware of the secret I just placed inside her lunchbox. Her tiny fingers carefully braided the doll's hair, her lips moving in a soft hum, so innocent and unaware of the weight of what she was carrying. Okay, baby girl, I said, crouching down to her level, trying to sound casual, just like we talked about. Daddy put something special in your lunchbox today. But it's a secret, okay? Her face lit up with that pure joy only a child can feel. A secret? She giggled. Okay, Daddy. I forced a smile back, trying to stay calm, even though my heart was racing. This wasn't just about her lunch anymore. This was about finding out the truth, about protecting her, about protecting all the other kids who might be experiencing the same thing. When I dropped her off at school, I couldn't help but feel a sense of dread in my chest. I wanted to stay with her, follow her into the classroom, confront Mr. Thompson right then and there. But I couldn't. I knew that would be reckless without knowing what the recorder might reveal. So, I had to trust that Emma would be okay. Even though my mind was swirling with questions. The drive back home was agonizing. I kept thinking about the recorder. What would it pick up? What if nothing happened? What if Mr. Thompson hadn't taken her lunch? I tried to focus on work to distract myself. But my thoughts kept drifting back to that small device in her lunchbox. I had no idea what it would capture. But I knew this was my only shot. The hours dragged by, painfully slow. The weight of the uncertainty hung over me. Would I finally have the proof I needed? Would I be able to confront the truth, no matter how ugly it might be? The end of the school day seemed to take forever. I paced back and forth, trying to distract myself, but every thought returned to that little recorder in Emma's lunchbox. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was on the verge of something big. Something that could change everything. My mind kept racing with possibilities. What if I was wrong? What if Emma had misunderstood something? What if Mr. Thompson wasn't the one taking her lunch? But deep down, I knew better. I had to know the truth. Finally, the moment came. I parked outside the school, watching the kids begin to trickle out, their laughter filling the air as they ran toward their parents. When I spotted Emma, her small figure darting toward me, a sense of relief washed over me. She was smiling, looking so innocent, completely unaware of what was waiting in her lunchbox. She had no idea how much she was carrying with her that day. She climbed into the car, her tiny backpack bouncing with each step, and I tried to keep the conversation light. "Did you have a good day, baby?" I asked, masking the tension in my voice. She nodded, a bright smile still playing on her lips. I watched her for a moment, wondering if she felt any different, if anything had changed since that morning. When I sent her off with a hidden recorder in her lunchbox, I forced myself to smile, but my eyes flickered to her lunchbox, which was tucked away in her bag, as it always was. I couldn't wait any longer. "Are you hungry, Emma?" I asked, trying to sound casual. She shook her head. "No, Daddy," she replied. Mr. Thompson took it again. My stomach sank. There it was, that confirmation, the moment I had been waiting for. I tried to keep my expression neutral, but inside, my heart was pounding. I felt a cold wave of anger sweep over me, and it took everything I had not to shout, not to let the raw emotion take over. But I had to stay calm. I had to think clearly. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about standing up for her, and making sure the truth was heard. "It's okay, baby," I said, trying to soothe her, even though I felt anything but calm. "Let's go home, and we'll see what we can do about it." The drive back felt longer than usual, like the weight of everything was dragging me down. I could feel the pressure in my chest, the tension in my limbs. What if the recorder didn't capture what I needed? What if nothing happened, and it was all just a misunderstanding? But I knew that wasn't the case. I had heard the conviction in Emma's voice, and I had to trust her. When we got home, I didn't waste a second. I grabbed her lunchbox from her bag and unzipped it, pulling out the small recorder. My hands were steady, but inside, I felt the rush of anticipation. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears as I pressed play, praying that this would be the evidence I needed. At first, there was only the faint background noise, kids chatting, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, the low murmur of Mr. Thompson's voice as he gave instructions. Then, there was a soft rustling, the sound of a zipper being pulled open. I held my breath, waiting for what I knew was coming. And then, I heard it, Mr. Thompson's voice, smooth and casual, as if this was just another normal day. "All right, let's see what we've got today," he said, almost as if he had done this hundreds of times before. I felt a chill run down my spine. I could hear the familiar sound of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich being unwrapped. Peanut butter and jelly again, he said, almost mocking in his tone. You always have the best lunches. Emma's tiny voice followed, meek and hesitant. That's mine. You don't need all this. Sweetheart, Mr. Thompson said, laughing softly. Little girls don't eat much. Right? I'll take this today. There was another pause, a soft rustling, the sound of the juice box being opened. I do love apple juice, he added. And then, Emma's voice, small and almost scared. But I'm hungry. Mr. Thompson's response was sharp, almost dismissive. Mia, I told you, big people need it more. You'll be fine. The recording ended, and I could barely breathe. My hands were shaking as I pulled the earbuds from my ears. It was like the air had been sucked out of the room. I was stunned, furious, and heartbroken all at once. This wasn't some misunderstanding. This wasn't a small mistake. This was something much darker. Mr. Thompson, a trusted teacher, had been taking food from my daughter every single day, laughing about it, dismissing her hunger. I felt a storm of anger swell inside me. How dare he? How dare he treat her like that? How dare he steal from her? From any child? I couldn't let this go. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about every child who had ever been taken advantage of by someone they trusted. I knew exactly what I had to do. As I held the recorder in my hands, the weight of the truth felt both liberating and devastating. There was no turning back now. I knew exactly what I had to do. With undeniable proof, I wasn't going to let Mr. Thompson's actions slide. I wasn't going to let him continue treating children, including my daughter, with such disrespect and cruelty. The next morning, I was up before my alarm. The recorder still nestled securely in my pocket. The day felt different, like something had shifted. I drove to the school with a sense of purpose. My jaw clenched and my mind focused. I wasn't going to let emotion cloud my judgment. This was about justice. For Emma and for every other child who might have suffered in silence. Inside the school, the atmosphere was different. The usual morning hustle and bustle felt distant as I walked straight to the principal's office. Mrs. Anderson didn't waste time once she saw the urgency in my eyes. Without hesitation, she motioned me into her office, and I placed the recorder on her desk. The silence in the room was thick, as the audio played, filling the space with Mr. Thompson's words. The principal's expression shifted from disbelief to something colder, her lips pressing into a tight line. By the end of the recording, there was no question about what had happened. The evidence was clear, undeniable. Within moments, Mr. Thompson was placed on immediate administrative leave while an investigation began. I walked out of that office feeling a strange sense of relief, knowing that Emma and other children were finally protected. As for Emma, when I picked her up that day, she smiled, her lunchbox filled with food that was rightfully hers. And as she offered me a bite of her sandwich, I realized the most important lesson: no matter the challenge, it's always worth standing up for what's right. To follow more life stories like this, be sure to subscribe to our channel.